appreciate it. So we always have to do thank yous at the beginning. So first of all, I want to thank you to 13 Food and Beverage and Jackie, the best upstairs here, for hosting us. It's a quality venue, and I appreciate the fact that we're here. Secondly, I want to thank, there's a group in town here called Cambridge Authors, and sometimes I have ideas, and sometimes they're not good ideas. Sometimes I have ideas, and they work out, but there's a group, Tara's here, Christine's here, they're the ringleaders, and I want to thank the Cambridge Authors group, because that motivated me to do this short story compilation, so give them a hand. About 10 years ago, my son had this idea to start up a registered charity to promote opera in the Waterloo region. So, as you can imagine, promoting opera is a real tough thing. So about 2 or 3 years ago, my son said, "Dad, why don't we do more than just opera?" And so we got into spoken word, and I think Randy was here. We did a spoken word event last year. It wasn't packed. Maybe there was 10 of us. But anyways, the idea made sense. So I said to Dylan, can we do this compilation book idea? And it's promoting the arts. It's promoting Cambridge. It's hitting all the buttons. And so he said yes. And so I appreciate that Fuse is helping pay for this, because once again, if you have ideas, it's nice that somebody else will pay for the idea. So thank you to Fuse. So. The way it'll work today is, as I mentioned to you in your email, we're going to go alphabetical order. So nobody paid me to go first, and nobody paid me to go last. And basically, you can talk about your book, the story, how it came about, or you can just read from it, whatever you feel comfortable with. Somebody Bob, you've been there. Bob is I won't talk about everybody because it's not fair, but certainly Bob has at least 30 years of writing for the record in various papers, so when he submitted his story, I knew all the rest were going to be in for a challenge, and it also made me say, I'm not going to submit one. But anyways, Bob's going to come up here, give Bob Bird a hand.
Thanks, Paul. My contribution to the book came in the form of a memoir, and it's basically a story closer to 50 years in newspapers and as an author. It's a story about some of the things I came across, people I met, and the career's kind of got off to a bumpy start. As a matter of fact, it was almost over before it got started. I was in grade 8, and I always had my heart set on being a reporter or a writer. And we had a guidance counselor. Actually, it was the principal of the school. Came in at the end of June. He went up one road, down the other. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And then back then, you had 3 streams: tech, commercial, or academic. And so I told him I wanted to take the academic stream. I wanted to train to be a writer. And he said, "Well, think again, kid. It ain't gonna happen. You don't have the goods." And I kind of stopped for a minute and said, "Screw you." And settled to do it myself. In so many ways, I was sort of unlikely sort to become a reporter and get into business that could many times be stressful. I was a quiet kid by nature, badly lacking in confidence. At 6'2" and 160 pounds, I was saddled with the name Nick Stretch, Stretch. Friends used to tease me, and they'd look at me and say, "You're so skinny and you're so quiet that if you went to a party and stood sideways, nobody would know you were there." I got through high school. I was never a good student, and so getting through was just enough. And then headed off to Ottawa for a year at journalism school at Algonquin College. I wasn't in Ottawa very long before I got a job at the Ottawa Journal in the evenings, and it was basically just in the sports department. And you took down notes that hockey coaches, football coaches, whoever, whatever season it was, they'd phone in scores and you'd write a short story. Pretty simple stuff, but it did give you that sort of exposure. And one of the things, being in Ottawa, I was always a bit of a political nerd, even I think as a kid. And I often would skip class in the afternoon and then go down and sit in on question period in the House of Commons. I used to love when Diefenbaker would get up to speak. He had a dull, sort of quivering and just thundering voice. And I thought, there's my guy. You know. It's interesting, it was a few years later when I was working at a newspaper in Milton. The owner of the Mohawk Inn had somehow he had acquired the train car that Diefenbaker had toured in the 1963 election. And he invited Diefenbaker to drop by and see this. And so there was the owner of the hotel, maybe one or two other guys, and myself, Diefenbaker and Diefenbaker's aide. We were there for most of the afternoon. And I think we spent a book tour, and the aide was tried to sort of elegantly sort of move him over there. And Diefenbaker would get to the door of the car, and then one more idea, one more story, and he'd come back. And this poor bugger whose job it was to sit there all the time, he was not having a good day. So, it's coming near the end of the school year, and I was thinking that it's time just to get some experience and start doing it rather than just being in school practicing. So I managed to get a job at a newspaper in Milton. It was a weekly newspaper, and I got the job, had a bit of a party before I left Ottawa, hopped on an all-night train, and then arrived in Oakville about 7 o'clock in the morning, and a fellow from the paper picked me up and took me to Milton. That time for Captain maybe to wash my face. And then, as it happened that very day, there was a manhunt for Mary Ann Schuett, a young girl, I think in 8 or 9 years old, went missing, and she actually was never found. But I was assigned to that with another fellow, and I thought, I didn't really count on this, especially after being on the train all night and not sleeping. At any rate, that was about a 12-hour day, and it was an introduction to a career that would take me from Milton and up to Kirkland Lake for a year, back to Milton for about 10. Eventually got a job at Newsday. It was a new paper in Waterloo, and the idea was that this paper was going to challenge the record. And we were just full of piss and vinegar. It lasted about 4 months. I ended up getting an offer out in Edmonton to go for a trial. I was there for about 2 weeks. The morning, one night, the boss called me over, really good guy, and he says, they're going to offer you a job in the morning, or in the afternoon, it's not in the paper. Don't take the first offer. They'll come out, everything will be okay. But if they can move on, they will. Well, there was no offer. The next day I went in, and you could just cut the tension in the air. And I asked the guy, so what's happening? He says, keep your head down, Toronto's here. What that meant was one of the principals from Toronto had arrived, and he basically fired the publisher, fired the advertising director, circulation director, and anybody else that didn't have at least 3 months and got a goodbye. So, turned back in the car, drove in the middle of January, back across the prairies, and ended up doing a little bit of freelancing for College Star. And from there, I became the editor of the Cambridge Times, and eventually transferred over to the Record. Wanted to tell you just a story about one of the really interesting guys that I met in Milton. We had a newsroom. It was in the basement of a building. There was 3 of us, an editor, the other fellow, and myself. And the other fellow was a really smart guy. His name was Larry. But it was as if he was trying to squeeze work in between parties. So he'd often show up late and often looked like an unmade bed when he got there. And anyway, this one day, he rolls in 2.5 hours late. It was about the 3rd time that week. He looked like he slept in his suit. His pants were muddy, or shoes were muddy. They're not combed. And the boss called him in, he'd had it. He says, Larry, you gotta clean yourself up. Look, comb your hair before you come to work. Polish your shoes. Get dressed. Look the part. And Larry, geez, boss, if I did that, I'd never get here. Larry called me. He went his way, I went mine, and he went on to a number of different other papers, as did I. And every once in a while, you could call him a little blue. And this one day, I was working at the Record, and I hadn't heard from him for a couple of years. And he called and explained that he'd been out of circulation. He'd been in jail for a couple of years. Robbed the bank. Actually, robbed it twice. Didn't get enough money the first time, so he went back. He got away with it the first time, but got the second. And he explained that he had bipolar disorder, and could I help him get a job? I thought, geez, I don't know her. We talked for a bit, and I tried to offer what help I could, but that was the last I heard from him. Anyway, thanks very much.
Our next author is well known as a political animal for as long as I've known him, but actually this author, this political animal, also had a past as an author way long time ago. In 1995, I made the decision to try to restore the Hesper train station. That was an unsuccessful event, but during the course of doing that, I came across a short story called The Station Master, and it was by Doug Craig, and it was a phenomenal short story. So I was very happy when I received a submission from Doug for this book. So give your hand for Doug.
So Paul's a little modest. He was my campaign manager in 2000 and helped push me over the top on a recount of 27 votes for mayor. So here I went. That's how I started my political.
I didn't like the other person.
I liked me just a bit better. Paul's a dynamic individual. I mean, he's done a lot. No, he's done a lot in the Hesper area with the volleyball and everything else, and he has really sort of brought back a spirit of community up in the Hesper area, and I think throughout the Cambridge area. I was really pleased about this. I sent my story, and I write short stories. I write columns for newspapers that most people don't read, and other things. But this was kind of nice, and I've been writing short stories for the last number of years. My background goes back to Toronto. I grew up in Toronto. And I lived with my grandmother on Toronto Centre Island for a little while. I never knew my father, and my grandmother and I eventually moved to Yorkville Avenue when it wasn't the in place to live. And we lived upstairs in one room, just she and I. There was another bedroom with another family, and then another family in another room, and a washroom at the end of the hall. And of course, it was a very poor time. So at Christmas time, I said to my grandmother, and I was about 4 years old, I think, and I said to her, we don't have a Christmas tree. And she pointed to a lamp that had all these frills on it. She says, that'll be our Christmas tree this year. And she and I decorated that tree with, just some pieces of paper and so on. So Christmas has always been something very significant for me. But even more significant in later years, when Ginny, my wife, my darling wife, taught me about what Christmas and family and everything else in terms of meaningful. So I wrote a story. I always wanted to write a Christmas story. And Christmas time is a great time for most people, but for some people it's a very sad time. And so I tried to bring that into the story to some extent. What I'd like to do is just read one part of it. That's all. I could talk for a long time. I don't want to do that. But just sort of introduce it. It's about Matthew. On Christmas Eve, his wife has passed away. Lily's gone for 3 years. And he decides, like he does every day, to go out late in the evening and to do his daily walk. So Matthew started off slowly, following the chain of trees at the side of the road which stepped down Bruce Hill into the center of the community. The village lay curved beside the old Speed River. It was filled with aged houses, uneven sidewalks, and telephone poles appointed with old colored glass insulators. It was housed with the industry of those who appreciated the roots of their past and by people who treasured the calmness that comes only with lives built upon the security of family and age-old friends. It was the backdrop this Christmas Eve for Matthew as he continued his journey into the night. Lily had once said that the village was like a book. Each neighborhood was a chapter, each house was a distinct paragraph, and the final sentence was concluded in the cemetery behind the Settlers Church. As he walked, he reflected on her words, and the pages turned with the passing of each building. At the bottom of Roos Hill, he stepped onto the river road. Miss Toll's house was the first one on the left, and it was a single clapboard construction with green shutters bordering each window. It was neatly outlined with hedges and bushes in the summer, pruned to the perfection through the eye of a trained gardener whose enjoyment was in predictability and order. Miss Toll was retired from the village school after 33 years of continuous service. She had prodded, guided, and taught just about every youngster that had been raised in the community. She had once aspired to a nursing career, but her diminutive 5-foot frame and a chronic childhood illness had undermined her early ambitions. The village had gained by this intervention of fate, and everyone had come to love Miss Toll, because hers was a classroom of kindness, fairness, and values. Stuart, what are you doing? Oh, nothing, Miss Toll. Then why are you not following along with the class as we read? Well, I am following along with the class, Miss Toll. With hockey cards? I was just putting them away. What is the class rule about being caught with hockey cards in your hand when the rest of the class is doing a lesson? Well, I have to hand them over and I don't get them back, he said sadly. That's right, Stuart. What hockey team are they? Hockey team? Yes, Stuart, I want to know what hockey team you have in your hands. The Red Wings, Miss Toll. Well, you're lucky, Stuart. They're not my favorite team. You may keep them, but don't let me see them until recess. Put them away now. Thank you, Miss Toll. Don't thank me, Stuart. Thank the fact that I don't like the Red Wings. And Miss Toll never changed, even after her retirement. Unabashed, she moved about the village as if she was still in class. She would still indulge herself by hugging all her former students, whether in the village store or during the Sunday afternoon park concert. This she insisted on, much to her delight and much to their embarrassment. Equally, she would admonish those past pupils whom she felt didn't properly support local horticultural society efforts to raise money or fail to help in the village's annual spring cleanup. Just a small section.
Okay, so the next one is Ken, and there's many authors here I never met before, and of course I'm not going to say which story I like the most, but I thought Ken's was a strong story. But what gets me the most with Ken's is he just told me he wrote it when he was in high school. And certainly you have a skill set, my son. You have a skill set. So we're going to have Ken come up and talk about his story. Thank you.
Hello, folks. This public speaking thing is not for me. But and following Doug, Craig, and Bob. Oh my gosh, you got some great speakers and stuff like that. But anyway, I wasn't going to write any notes. I should have just put down little words, but now I wrote down too much and I'm looking at them. But anyway, sorry about that. The Irish have a saying that most writers are failed talkers, and I feel I fall into that. Right? So when Paul was looking for people to put in stories, he said, one of the requirements will be you have to be available on this day to give a little talk. And I thought, well, I'll put my story in anyways. Probably won't get accepted. So anyways, but I did get accepted. I'm very happy with that. And now I'll try to get this over with. I used to have to give speeches in grade school, and I hated it. I would have liked to have called in sick every day. But anyway, so in grade 8, we had to do a 5-minute speech. And I was so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. And I read through it in like 1 minute. And so that year when the yearbook came out, it was Ken Doran, most likely to be an auctioneer. So I'm trying to get this done pretty quick too. I did do this story in grade 13 for Mrs. Webb, English at Bramley Secondary School. And I hung out with a bit of a tough crowd. We really weren't that great of students and stuff like that. And I actually had been home in that year, that's over 40 years now, watching the Remembrance Day ceremonies, and I got this idea for a story, so that's where I wrote it. And so I handed it in, and Mrs. Webb, she said to me, oh my gosh, she said, I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've only given out 2 A+, and yours is 1. She said, and then but I guess because I was always in the back of the class and not really all that active, she said, you did write this, didn't you? Yes, I did. Yeah. So then she made me read it to the class. I was like, oh my gosh, I hate public speaking. And so I didn't do the best job reading it because my friends were going to make fun of me and being a keener and all this kind of stuff. So then she said to me again, you did write this, didn't you? So anyways. But as for the story itself, as I said, I got it from the Remembrance Day ceremonies on TV. And it's called The Glory of War. And basically it's about a young man who grew up with his father and his buddies. And they would always meet and talk about their war stories from the Boer War. And then this boy here, he would listen to these stories, and he just wanted to become a soldier himself. He wanted to experience the glory of war. Well, sure enough, he ends up being in Vimy Ridge. It became known as Bloody Sunday. And it was just a horrific day. But anyways, and then he realized that basically war is not glorious. It's anything but. So that's it. I hope that's good enough.
Ken, I'll be honest, your story was so good, I did an AI check, and you did. So again, the joy with this compilation book was getting stories from people you know, and new and established, and new authors. And this is another person I did know, Elaine Francis, and this story had a musical angle to it, and the conducting angle to it, which I'm not going to talk about myself, but it had meant a lot to me too. So Elaine, come on up and talk about your book.
Sure.
Yes, I feel like the last speaker, Ken. I always disliked very much public speaking, but I also decided to submit a story and thought, okay, maybe it will get accepted, maybe it won't. And yeah, that's what I got. But it did, and so I'm here to actually read a bit from the story. The story is about a woman who is wanting to pursue her passions and go after her dreams, but remain true to herself. So I think it's a story we can all relate to. The story is called Full Circle. At times it seems chaotic, but there is perfect order hidden within. The discipline is exacting, the order calming, the instrument a total extension of the soul. One is laid bare and playing in an orchestra. Giles stood on the stage of a large concert hall, violin and bow gripped tightly in her left hand, waiting for the audition to begin. Conductor and a panel of musicians were sitting, laughing, talking with one another. They would judge her initiation, her rite of passage. Please begin with a sight reading on your stand, and then continue with your prepared piece of music, the Prokofiev Violin Concerto, I believe, conductor said. Yes, Jai replied. As she avoided looking at the judges, and with fierce determination, shored up her courage and poured her soul out. It was at once a confessional and a triathlon. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Run, swim, bicycle, aching muscles endure. Thank you. If you're successful, someone will contact you. Next. Conductor dismissed her. 2 weeks stretched into an eternity, and Jai received voicemail on an early Monday and the next rehearsal, telling her, you've been accepted into the symphony. And the next rehearsal is on Wednesday, 1 p.m. in the concert hall. Jai was ecstatic. Getting through an audition was one thing, but meeting expectations would be another. She felt better when she understood the rules, for no matter how difficult, they calmed her. She knew conductor would expect more than perfection, demand absolute devotion, and she was ready to give him that. She wanted to tell Ernzo. The sound of the violin echoed through the underground concourse of the subway, and she knew it was him. Jaya began to run, filled with excitement, and there he was, wearing his woolen sweater, his long matted hair flying, hunched over, relentlessly wild eyes expressing love for his instrument. Enthralled crowds, place change, sometimes bills in the case. He was rough, unshaven, living in his own world. Jai stood silently watching, her soul filled with the sounds reverberating from his violin. Ernzo sensed her, momentarily looked up, smiled, and finished playing. People drifted away, but Jaya stayed, waiting to talk with him. Ernzo, it's happened. I made it into the symphony. You were right. I knew you would. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. But always remember what I told you. Jaya couldn't forget the day she met him. She was discouraged, ready to give up music, and was among those people who had stopped to listen to his playing. But that day, she lingered as he reverently covered his violin with a cotton cloth and placed it in his velveteen-lined case. He had looked up for a moment, smiled at her, but she'd started to cry. He'd held her and told her not to let anyone discourage her from continuing with her music. He'd held her. Never forget, and she never forgot his kindness, and he became her friend, mentor, and confidant. What could possibly discourage me now, Ernzo? This is my dream. I just hope you'll always feel that way. That's all, Jaya. You've helped me so much. Let me buy you a coffee. Not today. Some other time, perhaps. Okay, Arthur. That's the end of it.
So next up, this story, Richard Henning. I liked it. It was fresh. Of course, it's called the freshest energy. That's not what I call it that, but it was different, and I like that. And I was looking forward to meeting Richard, but he's more elusive than we think. He said, "No, I can't come, but I'm going to send my son," and I think that's amazing. Sam, come on up, talk about your dad.
Sorry my dad couldn't join, but happy to be here on his behalf. He was very honored to be included in this compilation, so yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. My dad, he spent most of his career working in patents, and he had before that studied physics, so when he writes his stories, there's always a kind of an engineering or sciencey dimension to them, and he writes a lot of science fiction stories as well. This story, The Freshest Energy, isn't a science fiction story, but it does center around a windmill, so take that for what you will. Yeah, it's more of a lighthearted story, though there's some parts that are decidedly not lighthearted. But in any case, I just wanted to read a snippet for you here. So, thanks. Donovan had nervously glanced at his watch before he was about to look to the sky. But then he saw the shadow that his windmill power station had cast. For some reason, the shadow looked like the ancient windmill that Don Quixote, with lance in hand, did battle against. It surprised him that he never noticed this before, and he thought the irony of the situation was that in actuality, he was defending the windmill, and the family and friends of his called him Don. And for his lance, there was a large bunch of pigeons, but more on that later. He'd been working on his wind power project for years. Ever since he had been downsized from his job, he took an early retirement, but it badly hurt his self-image. His home life with his wife was never the same, and he would try many times to calculate how much that had been downsized since losing his job as well. Many years later, his self-worth improved after his two grown daughters, Gail and Denise, had told him he was heroic in the way that he had nursed his wife, their mother, through the last 18 months of her life. So it was in the last few years, with his wife's final blessing, that he worked on his project of survival. He had built the windmill by himself on the extra land he had bought adjacent to the house. He designed the windmill and physically put it together. The house and land were located between two large hills, so there was good wind funneling into the area. Skipping ahead. This all created a problem. Donovan lived by himself and only used about 7,000 watts on average, which meant that he could sell back to the local utility company about 60,000 watts. The trouble was the utility company, Foscorp Energy, didn't want to buy his electricity. They either didn't need it, or the interfacing between his system and theirs was too complicated, or too expensive, or fill in the blank, thought Donovan. So after much arguing up and down the corporate ladder, he took them to court, with his lawyer arguing that under the Environment and Health and Human Administration rules, green energy should be bought and used from any provider, with interfacing problems notwithstanding. And of course, he lost in court over the meaning of should and must, and Donovan thought he heard the judge say corporations always win over the individual, but his attorney told him that this was not directly said in so many words, but that one must really, in the long run, draw that conclusion. And of course, also, the appeal would be expensive, but it would be sort of a hat trick, potentially. They could win over the utility company, beat the judge, and in the end, make money back on the electricity the utility should have bought. It had been a week after the court decision, and Donovan, who could not afford the appeal process, was determined to hide his dismay on the whole affair. when he went to pick up his daughter, Celia, from elementary school, his daughter, Gail, had a doctor's appointment, so it was he who arrived at her school, and after presenting the note from Gail at the office, he and Celia took off to the little mall in town for a snack. As they drove, she right off told him that she was so sorry that no one wanted to buy his electricity, particularly since it was the freshest and greenest electricity in town. He had never thought of his electricity as the freshest in town, but if you do harvest the wind, it probably is the freshest thing around. Thank you.
I forgot to thank a couple people. So I know Catherine and Christine know this woman. She's not here today. But there's a person, if you ever do put out a publication, you want somebody to edit for you. Her name is Catherine Muss, and she's amazing. Once again, this stuff doesn't happen because of Paul Lang, and this happens to people like Catherine, who goes through this thing meticulously. And everything I thought I'd done it right. No, she had many corrections. So Catherine's not here. I want to thank her for her editing work. And then I this is kind of bad that I've waited till last to forget to thank this person. But anybody that lets me stay in my room for 23 hours a day is a nice woman. This is my wife, Deborah. So thank you. So again, when we look at the novels and we look at the short story topics, and fantasy is not something I know about or I'm strong in, but when Andrew, who's going to come up next and speak, he presented this to me. It was flawless, but then I found out later he teaches this at college, so you should have been good, Andrew. Anyways, Andrew, come on up and speak about it. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to read from my story, and it is called The Kelpie. The Kelpie's rage was in the beating of the waves, in the howl of the wind. She was in the lashing of the sea foam, reaching over the strakes with cold white fingers. She was in the forked lightning, the roar of thunder, her hunted cry. And Connell leaned over the longship's prow, barbed spear in hand. Wind whipped his face, stinging his eyes with salt and snow, and tugging at his blood-red hair. With his other hand, he gripped the stem post, fingers burning as the ship tossed, riding the storm like a wild horse. He would pull. His words fell into the wind and rushed back at him, joining the Kelpie's storm wail. Pull like your lives depend on it. And behind him, he could hear the heaving breaths of men at oars, the rhythmic splash of their catch. He turned his head a moment, fingers wrapped round the post. The men sang out a sailor's chant and pulled, the bared muscles straining on arms and legs. They were good men, warriors all, men who'd locked eyes with death and made him blink. They'd followed him out of his father's hall, loyal retainers keen for glory. Yes, it was glory he'd promised them, and vengeance also for the lives of brothers drowned and devoured. Glory and vengeance both they'd find here in the bowels of the storm, far from the jagged coasts of Craigarran. A flash of light and the drum of thunder, above the black sea's foaming crests reared the horse's head and forelegs, riding the seas like a heathen prow, a goddess of rhyme and brine, there for a moment then covered again in a darkening veil. Pull, lads, he called out, his eyes fixed on the point in the darkness where she'd been. The she-devils there in the black sea yonder. Pull, I say, pull till the skin peels from your hands. The grunt of exertion was their only reply. The ship lurched, carving the ice-ridden sea. "We've got her now," he said, raising himself to full height and cocking the spear overhand. He wore no armor, too great a risk on the open sea, and bore no weapon save the spear in his hand and the sags in his belt, a blade of kings, as his father had told him. "Pull me in closer, and I'll stick her." The ship tossed as a great wave struck it upon the starboard, casting up icy spray. He teetered a moment, crouched, and tightened his hold on the stem post. Lightning danced across the sky, tearing the darkness like a beggar's rags. He saw it again, the horse's neck and dragon's body, clad in scales and fin. It looked upon him and snarled, bearing a mouth of jagged daggers. And Connell snarled back, standing again at full height. He brandished his spear and howled into the wind. "I come for you, monster. I, Connell the Beastmaster, son of Creighton, king of the Iron Rock." That was good, he thought. A beast should know the fame of the one who kills it. The wail of the storm turned to laughter. He heard it on the wind's frosted voice, a woman's scornful laugh. Kill me, master of beasts," she said. "You are far from the Iron Rock. This sea shall be your tomb, and that of those your pride has brought to ruin." The lightning flashed again, revealing her at greater length, her body rising in coils from the sea. She rose and loomed over them, hanging there a moment twixt air and sea, beyond the reach of his vengeful spear. Then she fell, and the waters shot up in towering waves. The ship rolled and dipped to port side, filling with ravenous brine. And Connell crouched low and stayed there. Another wave, born of her crash, soared to dizzying height, bearing down upon them. "Hold," Connell said, though he could hardly hear himself for the clamor of the storm. The wave struck, smashing against them like a drunkard's fist. He heard the panicked cry of his warriors as two fell shrieking into the sea. The others hunkered down, shivering deep within the bilge. "Fairy, protect us," he prayed. "Lend your aid and calm the storm." The waters raged, but the saint was swift with his mercy. The ship held. They had weathered the worst of the Kelpie's wrath. "To oars," Connell said. "In again. Give me but one good shot, and I'll have her spitted." On they drove, beating against black rollers. The waves struck violently, yet the lightning held back, and his gaze could not pierce the darkness. He stood taller, tossing his head, the wet locks slapping his broad back. She had taken her shot and missed the mark, and now it was his turn. She shrouded herself in darkness, shirking his hunting spear. The Kelpie knew fear at last, like any beleaguered beast. He cried out into the darkness a wordless, bloody song, the battle cry of the islanders of those savage days before the coming of the priests. He heard the serpent's rumbling response from deep within the darkness, a challenge. Thank you.
So I believe I met Dan McCain at the Badger, where the Cambridge Author Group meets once in a while. And I don't know if it was Dan or it was somebody at the table, but they were talking about, maybe it was you, Ken, they were talking about how they send it out to the publishers, you know, hoping somebody's going to pick up your book and release it. And it's just awful, right? It's like they might get back to you in 9 months, they might not get back to you. Anyways, that's always why I self-publish. I was sick of those. But anyways, Dan and maybe Ken, they were talking about it, and that kind of triggered to me, let's do our own thing. We don't need those people, and we've done our own thing. So Dan, let's come up and talk about your story.
Obviously, people here don't know me well. They gave me a microphone. All right, so one of the things that a lot of people believe is that if you die in your own dream, you will die in real life. I'm here to tell you that's not true. This story was inspired by me dying in my own dream. Okay? So I had to change it a little bit so I could do some first person. The story is called Second Chance. Okay? I should put my glasses on. Otherwise, I'm not going to see a thing. Looks like words were important. Oh, there we go. Your first goal? That's awesome, Chrissy. I shouted with a hissing rain. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there, but the meeting was very important. I feel like a heel as Chrissy says she understands. I picture Amanda frowning in the background. My wiper squeaks, smearing the freezing rain across the windshield. That's great. I'll look at Mom's video when I come home and I'll give you an extra big hug. I take my eyes off the road for only a second, maybe two, to disconnect the call. A second or two too long. The corner is right there, brakes and steering useless on the ice. My car slides off the road, plowing a downhill path through undergrowth in the rain. I slide onto the ice, and for the briefest of moments, sit there. A crack, and the car noses down. Icy water instantly up to my ankles makes me gasp. Panic. Water rising, knee deep, door not opening, futilely shielding it. Shivering. Water at my chest. Open the window. The power shorts. Get out of the seat. Get out. Can't move. Seatbelt still on. Scrabbling at the clasp. Can't. Chin in the water. Head up. Find air. Must find darkness. I heard the beeping first, then voices. Crying? I struggled to open my eyes. There was a blurry room. White ceiling, green curtains. A hospital? Dad? Chrissy's voice. Mom, he's awake! Two crying feminine forms rushed to enfold me in their arms. We all cried and held like we would never let go. It took more than a week before I was fully back on my feet. After dinner, I was in my home office when Chrissy came into the door. Dad, you want to take some shots with me? I'd love to, I said. But turning on my computer, I've got a lot of work to catch up on. Maybe tomorrow, okay? Sure thing, Dad. Promotions were coming up. I knew if I could squeeze a little more out of the Henderson deal, I would be a shoo-in. Ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. The sound of a hockey stick smacking the driveway and the plastic ball pounded on the garage door seemed to rattle through my teeth. Ka-thump, ka-thump. I couldn't concentrate. Ka-thump. I slammed my chair back and stomped towards the front door. Ka-thump, ka-thump. The shots were coming more slowly now, but just as loud. Ka-thump, ka-thump, ka-thump. I reached for the door handle, but my hand paused as I saw her through the glass. Wearing my old high school hockey jersey, she was looking dispirited, her shots slowing down. Ka-thump. With a sigh, I reached into the closet and pulled out a hockey stick that I hadn't touched in months, maybe years. Hey, Rugrat, I smiled, stepping out. You think you're good enough to beat your old man? Moments later, as she stickled past me, I picked her up and carried her away from the ball. Hey, that's holding. Nuh-uh, not if the ref doesn't see it. A shrill whistle blew from the porch. Penalty shot, Amanda yelled, and we all laughed. Something we hadn't done together in a long, long time. More laughs came over the next few weeks. Going broke on boardwalk, catching the living room lamp dislodged by dance practice, movie night, everything I'd missed for the last 12 years. 2 months later, the announcement was made. The day of the big promotion. The butterflies in my stomach turned to acid as they announced David's name, not mine. The rictus of a smile ached on my face as I shook his hand. The boss took me aside. Look, it was a tough decision, but we've been disappointed with your numbers of late. Pick them back up, and we can put this all in the rearview mirror. Dinner was quiet. The atmosphere oppressive. I didn't talk much, but the girls could sense my hurt. After dinner, I went into my office to sulk. Daddy? Chrissy's tender voice came from the office door. Yes, I tried to smile. She walked slowly forward, eyes downcast, and put a huge bowl of ice cream on my desk. When I was little, I failed a math test. I was sad like you. Mommy gave me a hug, and you gave me a bowl of ice cream, and I felt better. She shyly looked at me through her lashes. Do you need a hug? Oh, God, yes. I pulled her into my arms. Something inside me shattered, or maybe came together for the first time in forever. Daddy, are you crying? Missing the next promotion didn't hurt as much, and I completely forgot about it that night as Amanda and I cheered Chrissy's first hat trick. Promotions came and went. I got a few, and I missed more, but I didn't miss Chrissy's first crush at 14. She shyly confided in me as we shot hoops at the park. Later, over her heartbreak, I gave her ice cream and hugs. If you don't make this conference, you'll probably lose any chance you have at a future promotion here. Instead, Amanda and I cheered Chrissy, 16, as her team won the round robin tournament. Ice cream all around. They didn't think I could hear the whispers at work. So promising. He's lost it. A has-been. Now, the day before she leaves for college, under the lights at the park, we are playing 2-on-2 basketball against her friends Jada and Ryan. I call the color commentary. And Dad makes a brilliant bounce pass to Chrissy, who shoots an amazing layup and swoosh, 2 points at the buzzer, and the crowd goes wild. And big crowd cheering noises as they all laugh. Boom! A sudden crushing sensation in my chest takes my breath away and sends me to my knees. Dad? Dad! Chrissy runs to me as Ryan pulls out his phone. Boom! A massive squeeze and I fall, struggling. I see Chrissy, but she looks 12, sitting on the basketball hoop and crying alone. I reach for her. Boom! Another massive squeeze. That's about 5 minutes ago.
Thanks, Dan. Our next author is Tara Mondu, and you know, when people give back to the community without expecting to get anything back, that's a rare breed these days, and she's one of those type of people. She puts out the Cambridge Authors, she's in charge of this group, she dedicates herself to this group. Nothing comes back to her monetarily. In fact, probably more frustration. She'll have 90 on the Facebook group and 10 show up at the meetings. But she perseveres, she tries so hard. You're really a role model in the community. Tara, come on and talk about your book.
So advice to you, don't wear pleather shorts to an event when you're standing in front of everyone. Not a good idea, not a good idea. Anyways, hello everybody. I'm so happy to see you. I feel like I'm wearing 10 different hats today. I am Tara Mondu. I'm the co-founder of the Cambridge Authors. So I do know a lot of people here, a lot of my little authors, can I say that? All these little faces, I love, and I love seeing all the new faces too, and the families, the babies, and all the things. My daughter showed up. She was just down the street at the Cambridge Community Players, is that what it's called now? Doing her recital, her dance recital, and she's like, oh, I'll come and hang out with you for a couple hours. So thanks, honey, for coming, supporting mama. Can't do it without your family. My other daughter would have come too, but she's just like, she's been to enough of these events, she's sick of them. Christine, thanks for coming. My friend, my neighbor, all my things. So I do want to thank Paul, because wow, like look how cool this is. Look at this little book he's put together. And as authors, and some of us are editors, we've done self-publishing, this is not easy. It is not easy to put this book together, to wrangle us authors, to get us to submit the stories, to get us to follow the rules, to get us to show up here. So I really am so thankful to you, Paul, for putting this together with your son, with Fuse. I really appreciate it. He doesn't want to look at me. We appreciate you, Paul. I know you hate appreciation, but you try to make me cry, so now I'm going to try to make you cry. I do cry sometimes, so I'm like, if Doug Craig's going to stand up here and have a little bit of a choke, I'm definitely not going to be reading part of my story. So we'll just talk about myself. That's so much easier. So maybe I'll just say that it's so neat because I have all these authors, and we talk about writing, we talk about publishing, and we talk about the woes of this industry and how hard it is, right? But I don't actually ever really get to hear anybody's writing. It just sounds strange, doesn't it? So to hear your writing and you know, like Andrew, where'd you go? Like, what the heck, man? Like, where'd you come from? He shows up, he's really quiet, but who knew that he could write like that? So I'm so now impressed, now also embarrassed that my story made it into this book, and I think it's just because Paul's a little bit afraid of me. And I think that's
basically.
Yeah, I think you are. So thanks for your scaredy catness and putting me in your book. I really am honored. So the story is called The Purpose, but first I kind of wish that I had a bit of a podium, but just hang on a second. These are the stars of the show. Maybe I should get you to hold up for me. Okay. See these little, I call them doodads? See them? Okay, so they're just like little solar powered. Oh look, they're trying to move. They're so excited to see Ken and Bob. See how they move? So I'm just gonna stand here for 3 minutes while you guys watch them. Put back down. Maybe you should take them because one of their heads fell off already. What? I don't know. So every morning I wake up with the girls, right? So they are off to school, off to the school bus. I wake up and before I get my coffee, I go over to my kitchen sink, and in the window, on the windowsill, we have these little doodads, right? And so the one, I've decided the butterfly is the girl. I think she's an older lady, so she's called Butterfly. And then the other one, the bee, he's an older man. Okay. So every morning, Butterfly is like, dun, 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 dun. She's got all this energy. She never stops all day long. She's not always in sync, but she's always going. And bee, like, he's also going, right? But then I notice at the end of the day, maybe like I'm making dinner, doing the dishes, whatever, and it's dusk now, and I see that bee, the man, he's kind of slowing down. And Butterfly is still going. She's still going. She's got all this energy. I'm like, okay, they're in the same spot, so it's light. It's the same light. It's not a sun beam. Like, they're both in it. Why is she, and then he's like this, right? So I'm like, that's very fascinating to me. And it reminded me of a time years ago. Why are you laughing? Why are you already laughing? Okay, years ago, I was in Florida, and I was on the lanai. It's a balcony overlooking a golf course. And a foursome comes along, and it's the men, right? The women come along later. But the men, they're playing. They don't know I'm watching, and I'm watching with the coffee down there. And the three of them are happy-go-lucky. They're having a grand old time, laughing with each other, slapping each other on the back. And the one man, they're older, and he's freaking grumpy old man. Like, he is not happy. He's pissed off. He's throwing his clubs. He's just like, come on, Charlie. Come on, it's okay, Charlie. He's like, God damn, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, he's really, really grumpy. I'm like, why is he so grumpy? And God loved the grumpy old man. But I was thinking about grumpy old men. And I'm like, what, why, right? And I was putting together all this stuff, and you know, I was thinking about more like the 50s and the 60s, right? So the man goes to work, and he works really hard, and he brings home the money, and then his wife takes care of him, and takes care of the kids, and she knows the neighbors, and she does the bake sale, and she does the school stuff at school and everything, and then he retires, right? And then so, I'm just making this up. I'm sure it doesn't actually happen. So then he retires, and then he is home, and he's looking around, and she's very connected to her friends, her family, her children, her grandchildren, and he's feeling disconnected. And so he feels no one's seeing him. He doesn't really feel, he's not working anymore. He doesn't maybe feel as valued as he used to. And so he's just feeling a little resentful of her, that she's happy-go-lucky and everyone loves her, and he's just not feeling it. And so, anyways, to me it seemed apparent on the golf course that he was just, something was missing in his life. And then the women come, the foursome of women come. They're cackling, they're laughing, they don't care if they don't get their ball in the hole or whatever, and they're just so happy. And I'm like, I think that's what can happen sometimes, is women can tend to feel a little bit more connected, and then they're just happy-go-lucky, and sometimes the men have maybe a feeling of disconnect, even just for a small time in their lives. So then I'm looking at these two, I'm like, that's what's wrong with B. He doesn't feel like he has a purpose. He feels like he's missing something, and he's feeling resentful that she's figured it out. Anyway, so it goes on, and I thought I was going to write a short story about it to try to help B figure out what his purpose in life is going to be, to get him back on track. And I won't tell you the end of the story, but by the end of the story, he's doing this too, and he's happy, and she's happy. And so it's not a sad story, there's a happy ending to it. And so it's called The Purpose. And I think if we all just find out what's our purpose, are we writing, are we giving back to the community, are we raising our children, are we going out for drinks with our best friends, like what are we doing, right? But like whatever we do, Paul says I don't get anything back, I get it all back. Every time. So when something really cool like this happens, I can't talk. I feel like I get it all back, so thank you. And congratulations to everybody. I think this book is amazing. And thanks to Paul. Why am I crying? I'm such a nerd, honey. That's just me. So thank you all for being here, for taking your time, and I appreciate you all. Thanks.
Congratulations. Somebody fall on the give a word to us. Okay. It's just for you.